Welcome to this clean, fair deck critique. Today we are actually critiquing our budget Jodah deck. One of the submitters said that they love the deck, they just want to make it a little bit stronger, so we're super excited.
Alright, so this deck was submitted by Blue Khaki, and I say submitted, but like we mentioned, this is Rebecca's budget deck, and they just wanted us to make a few tweaks to it.
So they did provide a link, which is actually my budget deck link. So if you want to watch that video, you can check out the description below.
Yeah.
So let's kind of just dive into it. The commander is Jodah the Unifier.
Or SpongeBob, as he's recently become known.
The gold theme of this deck is really just legends, right? Legendary theme.
Yeah, Legendary Tribal is Jodah's just bread and butter.
Mm-hmm. And the areas of the deck that they really wanted to improve was just having cards, improvements with a higher budget.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times we really keep this very budget friendly on our channel. Sometimes there's some really great cards that get missed out on just because
we're keeping it so tight.
Yes,
in the budget.
We're really making sure that it's affordable for everybody. But there's sometimes some powerful cards that can sometimes get missed out on.
Yeah, and this one is still staying pretty budget friendly. They gave us an additional $50 to use, which I think, to be totally honest, we even kind of struggled reaching that. Jodah is one of those commanders that can actually really do well on a budget still. Yeah. It was a lot of the other legendary cards that really go well with Jodah
are kind of budget friendly already.
Aren't that expensive, yeah. So the comments that they just mentioned at the bottom is that they love our Jodah deck, and they have all the pieces already, but are looking for ways to make it stronger with a bit more budget in hand.
Well, great. Let's dive into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the replace these cards options, right? They're not bad cards, but again, since we now have a more upgraded budget, we can really add in the cards that would really shine in these cards places.
Yeah, a lot of these cards aren't necessarily, bad for the deck. Sometimes with these budget decks, it really is you're going with
what you can fit within the limited budget.
Exactly.
As best as possible.
Exactly. These don't quite fall into that category. They're still good, but there's just a few better options you can replace these cards with.
So first up we have is Amarith the Lustrous. Now, this one kind of helped a little bit with potential ramp or even getting, for example, cards out of your library into your hand. I mean, again, it's not bad, but there's just better cards out there that can do the same thing, but better.
The next one is Arthur Marigold Knight. This one, very similar to Amarith. For the cost, this one costs 5 mana. The effect just isn't quite worth it to pay that mana cost.
Yeah. Arvad the Cursed. Now this one is just a decent anthem effect for your legendary creatures, but with Jodah, we're getting, hopefully, if the deck is moving smoothly for you, a lot of legendary creatures out onto the battlefield. So giving your creatures an anthem of +2/+2 might feel good in the early game, but then it's going to quickly fall off.
Next is Bayek of Siwa. This card, it gives your legendary permanents double strike, but already Jodah's going to make your creatures so big, and it doesn't really give them trample or any other kind of ways to get over some pesky blockers. Yeah. So, good card, but there's better cards.
For this section, we actually removed all of these signets. And the reason why is just because we are adding better ramp options, right? Jodah is a 5-color commander. And so the signets were there to just kind of help the mana fixing a little bit. But now that we have better ramp options and better mana permanence in that regard, there's really no need for these ones in the deck.
Yeah, signets can be really good in some decks, but they kind of fall short in 5-color decks for sure. Day of Destiny is again just another anthem effect that it works with this deck, but Jodah already does this in a more effective way.
Javi the Allfather. This one was really just primarily used for some recursion, but we have put better recursion in this deck. So it's just not as an effective card in the regard of instead of bringing legendary creatures back out or, choosing particular ones, this one has a very specific, it has to be less mana value from the graveyard. So there's just kind of like, yes, we have recursion, but we put better ones in its place.
Heroes Podium. This is basically just Jodah's effect twice, where your legendary creatures get +1/+1 for each other legendary creature. And then the X cost to just look at the top X cards of your library and then put one into your hand, it's really not worth that mana cost. You're basically able to just cast a legendary permanent and do the same thing, but you're just putting it onto the battlefield instead.
Kellan joins up. Now this one, another Anthem effect, right? It's just a cheap legendary enchantment. But overall, you know, they're just better cards, and Jodah does do this better. It does offer plot, but it's only a mana value 3 or less. So, again, not to say that there aren't a decent amount of lower mana cost legendary permanents in this deck, but overall, there's just better options.
Yeah. And we removed a bunch of these Anthem effects just because Rebecca has played this Jodah deck and tested it a lot. As fun as the Anthem effects are, with Jodah, they're not really necessary.
Yeah, it's, the last time we played, I was able to probably get about, 20 legendary creatures out onto the battlefield, pretty much with this deck. And, again, it was like, kind of like, okay, these Anthem effects are great, but, my creatures are already +19/+19. Like, +1 or +2 here and there. It feels great in the early game, but in the later game, I'm like, yeah, that's not really.
Yeah, and this is kind of a separate tangent, but similar reason to remove this card is with Jodah, you can reach a stage in the game where you have like 3 or 4 triggers happening constantly, and it really helps you to have less triggers, really.
Yeah, there was a point where I took I'm not even kidding, 30-minute turn. And I know what you guys are thinking, like, what the world is that about? But it was because there were so many triggers. So, you know, there's ways in this deck already, in the original deck, that can just make your deck go completely out of control. So to have, like, those Anthem effects, and you're just, like, sitting there like, okay, what is this? Okay, this is a 25/25. Oh, no, 27/28. Yeah. It's just too much.
This one we're removing just because it's an Anthem effect that requires a lot of micromanaging.
Yeah.
Kolovari, God of Kinship. Again, this one, it's really only buffing itself by the time you have 3 or more legendary creatures on the battlefield. And we also removed a bunch of these effects where you pay an amount of mana, tap, and you get to find a legendary creature to put in your hands. It's just...
We've got better options now that we don't need to be paying a bunch of mana or, decent amount of mana even to try to put things into your hand. It'll just be a lot more effective at doing that in general. Rograk, son of Roga? So this one is just, when we are cascading with Jodah, we do have lower mana cost legendary permanents, right? And so this one kind of gave it a potential to, like, you can cascade into it, but it really does not help if you have it in your hand. And also there's, better creatures that have trample already. And so we took this one out. Again, it's super cheap mana cost, but there's just better things.
Shalai, Voice of Plenty. Now this card does give you and your creatures hexproof, but we've just added some better protection.
So for this one, we're just removing an island and a swamp just for better mana options.
Yeah, these cards, again, I'm not always a proponent for removing lands from your deck, but they're basic lands. We got some better options now. We got more money.
Got more money.
Got more money.
Annie joins up. This one is a solid win con piece in this deck. Because if a triggered ability of a legendary creature you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Well,
I'm sure we don't need to explain to you why that's good in this deck.
Yeah, Jodah, right, constantly triggering can be a big problem. And if it triggers other legendary creatures, there are some powerful other triggered abilities outside of Jodah's in this deck.
Alright, Bard class. Now this one again does have a little bit of that anthem effect that we somewhat removed, but really this is in here for the level 2 effect of just removing a green and a red mana from the cost of your legendary permanents. Just some really solid ramp and just makes a lot of your cards cheaper.
Well, and another thing too, if you can get this out and get it to level 2 before you get Jodah out, well, guess what? Jodah is now 3 mana to cast. Chromatic Lantern, this one is just a fix to make sure that you're getting the right colors. It's just an iconic staple for 5-color commander decks.
Mm-hmm. Alright, Commander Sphere, again, another well-known staple in Commander. We have somewhat grown to more appreciate this card recently. I used to think like, oh, it's 3 mana for a card that lets you add 1 color in your commander's identity, but
it's actually, seeing it in game and playing it more and more often, I'm like, yeah, it's actually, even though it is 3 mana, just to have that mana flexibility for your commander, honestly can really change the tide of the game. Crystal Skull Isu Spyglass. Now this one has a little bit of everything. It gives you a little bit of some ramp. It allows you to cast historic spells from the top of your library, and you get to look at the top of your library at any time. It's just pretty well-rounded in plenty of categories. Mm-hmm. Faeburrow Elder. This one is great because it is a fantastic ramp piece, right? Mm-hmm. For each color among permanents you control, you add 1 mana of that color. Well, that can add up pretty quickly in a 5-color mana deck.
Gandalf the White. Now, this card we're really just suggesting because it gives you the ability to cast your legendary permanents with Flash. That can be really strong with a Jodah deck. Having the ability to, cast multiple creatures even when it's not your turn
can become a real problem for opponents real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia. Now, this one I honestly just used for primarily a ramp piece. The secondary ability, there's, again, there are some creatures in this deck that have a power of 5 or greater, but overall, we really just want to be using it for that first ability.
Kethis the Hidden Hand. Now, this card is a great alternative to Javi the Allfather. It does have that recursion effect, and it also reduces the cost of your legendary creatures by 1 colorless mana.
Leyline of the Guild Pack. This one is just to make sure that you get your correct colors. That's pretty much what it's all for.
Mm-hmm. Relic of Legends. Now this one is another great ramp piece, and it has that added benefit of letting you tap an untapped legendary creature to add 1 mana of any color. Just really solid ramp with Jodah.
Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. This one is another great card. Now, we're primarily wanting to use her for her secondary ability, right? Because it's add X mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. With Jodah's Anthem effect, you can easily get quite a bit of mana with this ability.
Soaring, since we removed a bunch of the signets, and you've kind of seen with these other cards too, we just wanted to include some better ramp options, and Soaring just fits that description.
This is our Pricier picks section. Now, we're not expecting for you guys to, include all these options in the Pricier picks section. What you'll want to do is, again, with sticking with the budget, pick 1, 2, maybe 3, depending on how much of a budget that you have, or making sure that you're sticking to that $50 extra budget. It's just overall, these are the cards I'm like, oh, these would be really good in the deck. Great, honestly. But, again, they've got higher cost, so pick and choose,
yeah.
Will.
Avacyn's Memorial. Now, this card is kind of expensive mana cost-wise, but the protection that it gives you is so worth it. Dihada, Binder of Wills. Now, we want to highlight this Planeswalker for her first ability and her ultimate. Her first ability, especially if you use it on Jodah, gives him a great way to swing in and attack without being threatened. Gaining Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible, that's...
until your next turn.
Yeah, that's pretty strong.
You can protect yourself for pretty much an entire round.
Yeah.
Which that's really useful because Jodah is your main combo piece.
Yeah. And then her ultimate is just game winning. It's basically an insurrection.
On Planeswalker Ultimate 4.
Yeah.
Eseka, God of the Tree, and Prismatic Bridge. Now, both of these, they're great in their own ways, depending on which way you really want to take it. Eseka is really more about, like, again, extra mana ramp. You know, we really want to be getting a lot of legendary creatures cast, so having plenty of mana ramp will help make sure that we get that as quickly as possible. As for the Prismatic Bridge, this one can help get you legendary creatures onto the battlefield, but, and a very important note with this one, you're putting it onto the battlefield, you're not casting it from your hand, so Jodah does not proc from it. But even just having a 5-cost legendary enchantment with the, the cascade effect from it entering the battlefield, sometimes can just make this card worth it.
Yeah, and it even just is a better fix than a bunch of those other cards we removed where you're just
searching.
Yeah, and putting a card into your hand. This one, it does go onto the battlefield. Helm of the Host. This card goes so hard with any legendary creature in this deck, but especially with Jodah. This card lets you create a token copy at the beginning of combat, but it doesn't have the legendary rule applied to it.
Yes, and with the anthem effect that Jodah does provide, right, it's not going to affect the token copy. But if you're making multiple, for example, copies of Jodah himself, that can become a problem really fast.
Yeah, kind of like what we mentioned earlier. This deck, it can start just having trigger on trigger on trigger on trigger on trigger. So it can be a lot of fun, but you gotta
keep track.
know how to keep track of your triggers.
Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. Now, we removed a lot of Anthem effects from this deck, and taking a look at it from first glance, you'd be like, well, isn't this just another Anthem effect? But it's better. Because, right, it gives multiple levels depending on how many creatures you control. And in a Jodah deck, it's so easy to get creatures out onto the board and really kind of proc, again, not proc, but like have those Anthem effects take place. They give Vigilance, Trample, and is it
Double Strike?
Double Strike. Okay, I was gonna say I'm missing one of them, but overall that is a lot more useful of an Anthem effect than just like a +2/+2.
Joyra, Weatherlight Captain, or Jehoira, something.
Boom.
This is just giving you a lot of card draw with, Jodah's Anthem effect and just all of that. It helps you just keep your hand full.
Najeela the Blade Blossom. This one is great for its secondary effect. Because, well, first things first, right? Attacking creatures or, your attacking legendary creatures become more powerful, right? They've got Trample, Lifelink, and Haste. But the second part of it is what makes it even more disgusting. It's the fact that you get additional combat phases. So if you've got a decent amount of mana, or even like a Selvala out on the battlefield, you could have like 4, 5, 6 combat phases. Like, that's crazy.
Reki, the History of Kamigawa. Again, this is just another great card draw option with how many legendary permanents you're casting with Jodah.
The Reaver Cleaver. Now this one can make a legendary creature that might not have trample even more formidable. But another great part about it is that you can create that many treasure tokens when it deals combat damage to a player. Jodah can make creatures really big. So, right, it's not that hard to deal a lot of damage to your opponents, and getting that many treasure tokens can help fuel that legendary casting spell engine.
Yeah, imagine having this out with Najeela. That is just infinite combats right there.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Combos on combos, man. That is it for our clean, fair deck critique. Jodah the Unifier deck.
Yeah, again, this deck was pretty solid already, and a lot of these options are really just to help you ramp out harder, a little bit more expensive ramp, a little bit more just expensive set pieces. But really, as we were looking at fixes for this deck, a lot of Jodah's great combo pieces are budget.
Yeah, they fit in the original deck.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to include what would be the most useful And I think, honestly, with my experience playing even, my Jodah deck, I've used my Jodah deck as a inspiration and / mostly, honestly, a lot of the options and set pieces in, the $50 deck, also the $100 one, too. When I was playing them, mana seemed to be the biggest issue. Getting the right mana. Because, again, you've got a lot of mana. Different colors, you got to make sure that you have that. So that just kind of fixes that problem. And I've played this deck so many times. And so I think that it will feel a lot in the regard of like feeling well-rounded.
Yeah. And again, this deck is just so strong. You got to really keep track of all of the triggers and all the effects that happen. But this is, I think it said on here, this is like only a tier 2 deck or something, according to...
they do like a base amount for like the Moxfield, I think. I don't know.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Tier 2. This deck is not tier 2. This deck is like tier 3 or 4 at most. Yeah. But...
yeah, it's not CEDH, and that's not really ever kind of what I'm going for with my decks, because, again, I want it to still be fun to play, not in, like, maybe a super competitive sense, but, just, like, still, like, feeling competitive, though.
Yeah. The point is, Jodah, crazy good commander, and you really don't need a massive budget to make him work.
If you liked this video, feel free to leave it a like.
Yeah, and comment down below if there are any other great legendary permanents or combo pieces that you would include in this deck.
And if you love this video, subscribe to join the Ferris community in all Magic the Gathering. Until next time, who's the most legendary creature under the sea?
Jodah the Unifier!
Thank you!